Ciarán, so good to see you. Thank you for taking the time to join us on our monthly video update. I'm eager to jump in and learn about what's been going on and what it all means. And there's plenty to talk about. So perhaps you can help us make sense of and review for us events of this past week.
Yeah. It's been a very eventful 7 days, we'll say, or probably 8 days actually. Whenever the drama started unwinding or unfolded. So as you know, we have been without government in the north for 2 years.
Yeah.
The DUP crashed the government, blockaded the re-establishment of the government. In between that, Sinn Féin emerged in an election to the Assembly in the north of Ireland as the largest party, Michelle O'Neill, the First Minister. So we've had this standoff with the DUP for 2 years over the issue. At the beginning, it was over the issue of Brexit, but it was also became an issue where they had lost a majority and Michelle O'Neill would be a First Minister. And I know we can talk about the context of that and the historic nature of it. But anyway, they had a set of negotiations with the unilateral negotiations with the British government. And those concluded just before Christmas. And we got to the point where a decision had to be made. And everybody was pressing both governments, particularly the British government, if negotiations are over, and the DUP are saying, no, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
So the DUP, I take it, got that message. And there's been a huge call on the streets in the north for government to come back, including the largest public sector strike. Because workers hadn't been able to access their pay increases for 2 years. So the long and short of it was there was a series of engagements with the DUP, with themselves, with the British government, with the other parties, and then they announced that they were coming back into the institutions. The British government unveiled what they had agreed with the DUP. And on Saturday, we had the Assembly reconvened. We had the election of a new Speaker. We had the election of a First and Deputy First Minister, and an election of the ministers. Yeah. So after 2 years, government is back up and working. By Monday, the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak had met with the ministers, and today the Assembly reconvened and elected all of their committees and oversight committees and chairpersons. So touch wood, we should be back on track, not only with the government in the north after 2 years, but also meetings of the essential North-South Ministerial Council, which coordinates work across Ireland, and also the British-Irish Council. All three of those institutions are like a three-legged stool. If one falls, the others fall. And with the institutions being up and the government operating, we would expect to see the North-South Ministerial Council meeting as soon as possible. So yes, it's been a good day, a good news story. After 2 years, institutions are back up and running. But it's bigger than that.
Yeah, that's, I think on the day-to-day, as you mentioned, the lack of cost of living adjustments for public service workers, the lack of a local governing body to be able to address the issues of people day-to-day, the reconvening of the body of the Assembly to make progress in that area is such great news and really vital to the operations of a democracy and for people to have continued faith in the workings of democracy. But if you zoom out a little bit, just a click, the historic nature of the day is way beyond that. That is a really incredible development. And can you speak a little bit to that, to kind of the beyond the day-to-day detail, the large historic shift we just experienced?
Yeah, and I think that's the key to understanding both the politics of the last 2 years, probably before that, but also why this isn't just quite business as usual.
Yeah.
Because there's been a quite fundamental and historic shift. So when Ireland was partitioned, I don't want to go back a long time, but when Ireland was partitioned over 100 years ago, it was partitioned on the basis of a sectarian hate count. Yeah. The 6 counties that became the north of Ireland were 66% Protestant and 100% Unionist. So there was no place for my grandparents who were Catholic and Irish in that society. They were afforded minimal rights. There was discrimination in housing, how political institutions worked, education, employment, all of that. And there was repression. So it's worth remembering this. So for 52 years, the North was a single party state. And in every decade, internment without trial was introduced. And the state was headed up by a prime minister. It was described, the parliament was described as a Protestant parliament for Protestant people.
Yeah.
And one of the prime ministers, who was prime minister for 20 years, Brookborough, felt liberated enough to say that he would not have a Catholic about the place and criticising other unionists for employing Catholics. So that was the nature of the state up until 1972 when it was paroled. Fast forward to where we are now. We now have Michelle O'Neill, the vice president of Sinn Féin, a committed Irish Republican, somebody who wants to see the reunification of our people and our island, now in that highest position in the north of Ireland. We see an assembly where there's no overall unionist majority. So we're in a good place. You know, we're in a place which is a shared place, which has to be a home for all. And we believe that is good for society. We believe we can tackle the day-to-day problems. But we also think that looking towards the future, the debate has to be on the constitutional position. It has to be about Irish unity.
Yeah.
And for people to say there's been no change, that's an impossibility. If I had said to you 20 years ago to be Sinn Féin First Minister, if you had said the Unionist Prime Ministers, and the last one of them was actually called O'Neill, Terence O'Neill,
Yeah.
that not just a Catholic, not just an Irish nationalist, but a Sinn Féin member would be heading up the government in the north as First Minister. That is truly historic, and it spoke to niceness in a way that was quite emotional.
Yeah.
The common piece that came to me, just tic-tacking with people and people texting me, and we were phoning on Saturday watching all this unfold, was, Jesus, I wish my grandparents had been alive to see this. They're the people who lived through those 50 years of single party state when they were excluded. And here you have, as I say, a Republican leader from Tyrone, a proud Gael, now heading up government. And it's different. It's not about triumphalism. It's about Michelle has dedicated herself to being a First Minister for all of our people and creating a shared space. That doesn't dilute our Irish republicanism. That doesn't dilute our vision of a united Ireland. It shows you what direction we're traveling. And most importantly, it shows that there can be no ceiling on our aspirations or the potential for unity. So that is a truly historic and a good news story in a world which is beset by conflict, that we have a peace process which is now back on track.
That's right. Yeah, you could see there was a global reaction to this news from all over, from major headlines in many languages about trying to capture both the news of the development of the peace process working and a government being reinstated, but then beyond that, the larger historical impact this shift has meant. It was really a special day, and one that was a long time coming. It was great to see. What about, can you give us a little bit of insights in some of the minutiae here, the details or stuff? Like, what's the evolving British position here to make this possible? What's emerging from that space?
Yeah, well, sometimes I feel like you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Yeah.
So the British government brought forward a document called Saving the Union. And a lot of it dealt with the trade issues of Brexit, and they will be tested and agreed with the EU, because that's ultimately where that agreement lies, is between Westminster and the EU. But it also used a lot of gratuitous language, and it put the British government in the position of that they have now articulated that they are not neutral on the issue of the union. They are not neutral on what happens in the future, which is a fundamental change in British government public position, but also undermines what has been agreed in the Good Friday Agreement. And they brought forward a number of proposals which they say will promote the union. Now, you might think it's a British government, that's what to do. That's fine for the British government in Britain. But in the north of Ireland, they signed the Good Friday Agreement, and the Good Friday Agreement obliges the current British government to act with rigorous impartiality in terms of this. So that would the positions that they've articulated, if they bring them to fruition, would actually contravene the word of the Good Friday Agreement, and also very much undermine the principles and the practices of the Good Friday Agreement. This is a unilateral approach by a British government, taken in consultation solely with the DUP, with no other parties. That is not how the peace process has worked. That's not how the Good Friday Agreement was developed. It was developed as a partnership between the governments and an agreement between all of the parties, and the government with jurisdiction acting with rigorous impartiality. So there's a break for that. So we have a good news with the Assembly being up and running. We have a bit of concern. We have a concern at the British government's position, where they have aligned themselves in a partisan way with one section of the community and with unionism against all others, and that could cause some issues down the track. Particularly that this British government has responsibility for setting the terms for a unity referendum, calling a unity referendum, and of course managing that unity referendum. You can't do that and be partisan at the same time.
And be advocating for one side to win. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and you can't do that, and you can't manage a divided society in the North by taking one side.
Yeah.
So some very fundamental challenges now. I'm not over-egging it, but these are concerns which we have raised. Mary Lou McDonald, our president, and Michelle O'Neill raised them directly with the British Prime Minister. And we have to bring the British back to the position. Their public position for over 100 years was that they were just doing what the majority wanted. There's no majority in favor of continuing the union, and they see themselves now as advocates of promoting that. So
that's untenable. Yeah, you can see how that's problematic, and it's not unusual for the British government to behave in a completely unilateral way that does not take into consideration the perspectives of human rights groups and all political parties and governments, right? We've seen that most recently with the legacy Act.
And unfortunately, that is how this British government has mishandled. And that's the reason why we were out with government for 2 years, have mishandled, I'd say, since David Cameron came into power and before even Brexit. But in the last 2 years in particular, the British government have set aside their obligations on legacy, have brought forward their own proposals. So it's not human rights aren't compliant with the Good Friday Agreement, were opposed by the British government, victims groups, as you said, and even the churches and all political parties. And they just ploughed that furrow. In the past 2 years, they've entered unilateral negotiations solely with the DUP and brought forward this paper. Which, when you read it, there's a paradox in the heart of all of this. They say the institutions in the North can only work with cooperation
of everybody.
But then they take this approach of saying, and now we're going to tell you what we are going to do.
Unilaterally.
I would argue if they think their views represent the people in the North, put it to the Assembly and let's see if it gets cross community support, and if not, then nothing.
Yeah. And just for, really in the weeds, that paper that was put out is a command paper, it's called. It's not legislation or law.
Yeah, so there are some legislative aspects to it, but it's aspirational, it's policy. It lays out what legal frameworks they will bring forward, what policies they will change, and what practices they will change, and also what groups they will fund. So all of that has not been tested, and a lot of it would not, I believe, gain the support in the Assembly. But it's fundamentally the British government taking a unilateral approach yet again to our peace process. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to see any British government involved in Ireland, and I like to see the back of this British government. But if it's going to be an incoming new Labour government, they also need to be clear that they will abide by the Good Friday Agreement.
The terms of the Good Friday that they signed. Yeah. So that, as you said, it's something like one step back after 2 steps forward. It's really important to remember the 2 steps forward. This progress, this push towards a functioning government, really set in the larger historical context, we can say puts us closer towards a clearer path towards unity, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I think it shows the direction of travel, that how the North has changed. That, as I say, the unionist electoral majority is now gone. You have a Sinn Féin, an Irish Republican, is the first minister. You have a government which is made up of which is no unionist majority in it.
Yeah.
You also will have it'll be very interesting how the government develops, because Sinn Féin have now got 3 key economic portfolios: finance, economy, and infrastructure.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of responsibility there. Also, interestingly, the executive office, which is the first and deputy first minister, is headed by 2 women, and also assisted by 2 junior ministers who are 2 women. Right. So women at their heart of this.
It seems like a good sign for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a positive news, and I would say, it's a watching brief on what the British government this British government have said that they will do, and it's a case of just bringing them back to their commitments, bringing them back to what is actually
They've
worked in the
agreed.
past.
Exactly
Yeah,
right.
what
Trust but
delivered.
verify. Right? Is that the motto? Right. Yeah.
Well, if you want to quote President Reagan, that's okay.
I
I was
think a lot of people
gonna
said
start my
shoot up.
introduction. You could quote Reagan. I was gonna start my introduction by saying, sometimes nothing happens for decades, and then decades happens in a month,
That's
which
right.
which was Lenin.
That's what it felt like this last week. That's right.
Yeah.
So to add some excitement about this path towards unity, I really want to make sure that our viewers and listeners are aware of, and probably by now, if you're following us on socials and newsletters, March 1st in New York City at the Great Hall in Cooper Union, we will be hosting the Irish Unity Summit along with 7 Irish American organizations. We are working together to bring this conversation to the Irish America, to Irish diaspora, to initially the East Coast here to discuss the vision and the how of Irish unity. And tickets are moving very quickly. You can learn more on in our newsletter, on our socials, and on our website about events, because we will be hosting a very big event. Do you care to speak to what we have planned coming up here in the first? It'll be Friday, March 1st.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be an exciting and informative event, and that's the two crucial bits about it. As I said, our earlier conversation was about how change has happened and momental change. So we're looking towards the future, and what does it look like? What is the potential for further change? So it'll be an opportunity for people not only to share visions of what a new and united Ireland would be, because we have in Ireland the ability to redefine this nation and build a new sense of governance, a new set of relationships. You know, it's not a case of just adding the north onto the south. It's taking the best of both and also dispelling the pieces that don't work. So we have that's a huge opportunity to create redefine a new nation.
Yeah.
So we will have those, but we'll also have an educational aspect to it about the how of it. We have some very distinguished speakers, including Professor Brendan O'Leary and Megan Stack, who has written about Irish unity in the Irish Times. We have speakers, a diverse range of speakers from Ireland over. We will have Irish Americans talking about their piece. We'll have a political panel who will also be looking at political developments from an American perspective. And of course, we'll have sessions where people can have their questions answered. So that's right, the Q&A informative, informative, educational, hopefully it's inspiring. And there should also be a bit of crack and a bit of music along the way too, Greg.
Exactly right. No, it's shaping up to be quite an event. And if you haven't yet registered, highly recommend you do so now, because it is looking like this will sell out. The event is on March 1st. It is at Cooper Union in New York City at the Great Hall. So please look into that information and get registered, invite some friends, because it will be informative, probably a bit celebratory, and an exciting event, and shaping the vision for what's next. It's not to be missed. And then not long after that, we will have St. Patrick's Day events around the country. We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, I've got this funny feeling I will be spending most of March in airports.
So I imagine so.
Well, we will be, all being well, we will be in Washington in St. Patrick's Day to meet with congressional leaders, to meet with Irish American leaders, to meet with representatives of the administration, and to have as I say, I think this St. Patrick's Day will be different. We can point to a peace process which is working, and hopefully we can share our lessons for what has worked with other places of conflict throughout the world. So it shows that there's a hope there, that conflicts which seemed intractable can actually be resolved.
That's right.
It takes time, and there's some lessons learned. So I think that'll be a good trip. And then, of course, we have Easter at the very end.
Right after that, exactly right, March 31st.
So we'll have people in Washington. We will have, I think Paul Maskey will also be traveling to New York for a series of events. And we will hopefully have a First Minister, the first Sinn Féin First Minister, traveling as well. But she'll be traveling as part of government. That's right, which is a very good development. So to stay tuned to, you all know now that all of these events, registrations, information, and headlines come to you first through our newsletter. Make sure you're subscribed to that and follow along the social media. It just hit me now that we'll be doing March 1st.
St. Patrick's Day and March 31st. So perhaps we'll be napping on April 1st and getting back to it April 2nd, because it is going to be quite a busy March on the horizon. Thank you, Ciarán, for taking time. Yeah.
And a big shout out. We will have speakers in Chicago, in San Francisco for Easter, Philadelphia the week after Easter Sunday. We'll have people in New York, and I will be traveling to Toronto and Vancouver, all being well. So
yeah,
it'll be quite the trip. And as I say, the context to this is real change is happening in front of us.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's quite an exciting time. So we hope to see you all soon. Hope to see you in New York on March 1st. Thank you for the update, Ciarán, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
Mark.